Welcome to the latest Evershed Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.
Welcome to the second in our podcast series, focusing on employment and education-related matters in the Middle East. My name is Corrine Sobbers, and I'm a Principal Associate at Evershed Sutherland. I've been an employment lawyer for over 10 years now, and have a particular focus on supporting and advising clients in the education sector. I'm based in our office in Doha and advise on employment, labour, and education-related matters in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, alongside my colleagues in our regional Middle East employment team. At a time when demand for school places is at an all-time high in some parts of the Middle East, ensuring high-quality teaching and achieving or maintaining educational excellence remains a top priority for education institutions across the region. The quality of an institution's workforce is the major factor which drives reputation and improvement in education. Excellent service provision can only happen when the right people are attracted, recruited, and supported to do their jobs as effectively as possible. In this context, institutions need to recruit individuals that can provide the best possible leadership, teaching, support and learning, not only to staff, but to pupils, and not forgetting parents. Practically, what does this mean? Well, I will highlight 5 top tips for recruitment based on our experience of advising institutions both locally in the Middle East region and internationally. Top tip 1, workforce planning. This may seem obvious, but really understanding the number and type of staff that are needed, the skills that are required of them in the context of the institution's culture and strategic plans, statewide curriculum and other guidelines, and the funding available and legislative requirements is crucial. Many GCC countries also have nationalisation programmes, which will require nationals to be given priority or even the exclusive right to occupy certain roles, and so this will need to be considered carefully when planning your workforce. It is also a good idea from the outset to consider the type of employment contract that roles will be subject to. For example, will they be on indefinite or fixed-term contracts or hourly paid contracts? The type of contract can have different implications across the region in terms of notice periods and termination as examples. In all GCC countries, the duration of the contract, the terms for automatically renewing a fixed-term contract, the notice period where it's relevant, and the consequences of terminating during the term should be carefully considered and clearly set out in the employment documents. Some employees may also already be employed by an institution in another part of the world and may be coming to the Middle East to complete a role temporarily or to assist with setting up a campus, for example, in which case how their employment will be managed will need to be decided. Factors such as will they continue to be employed in another country as well as the Middle East and have a dual employment arrangement, or will their employment elsewhere terminate and so they'll be employed in the Middle East alone, will be pertinent. An assessment of the applicable employment entitlements that will apply in any case will also need to be made, and it will need to be properly managed both in the documentation and in terms of communication with the individual to manage their expectations. Top tip 2, have a good understanding of the local legal recruitment process, the information and documents needed and likely timescales. Across the Gulf region, expatriates need residence and work visas to be able to reside and work in a GCC country. In terms of immigration, there are a few key points to be aware of, and they are that expatriates cannot work for another employer in the GCC country than that which holds their residence and/or work visa without permission from the applicable authorities. Individuals should work at the premises of the employer under which they have the requisite immigration visas. Individuals must only carry out activities which their employer is permitted to carry out, and there have been extensions of the type of visas available across the region, and institutions should consider which type of visa is most appropriate for any given role. The penalties of breaching immigration laws can be significant, including imprisonment, fines, deportation, and freezing of the ability to obtain further visas. It's therefore very important to consider and plan in order to comply with the local laws in place. The immigration approval process can take some time, and whilst you can have a good idea of the likely timescales to enable you to plan ahead, it's always, of course, subject to the authorities, and so the expectations of individuals need to be managed in this regard. A number of documents will also need to be provided by individuals to gain immigration approvals, such as marriage certificates if they intend to sponsor their spouse, and educational certificates which may need to be attested and legalised for use in a particular GCC country before the individual arrives. So there's quite a bit of preparatory work to explain and to manage with individuals. Top tip 3, do your due diligence. The labour laws and employment regulations across the Middle East region do not generally set out any specific procedures or guidance in relation to recruitment and background checking, save that where GCC countries have nationalisation programmes, legal obligations may be placed on employers to only recruit nationals for certain job titles, such as in Saudi Arabia, or to meet targets as to how many national employees are employed, such as in the UAE. There may, therefore, be some steps in relation to these requirements that institutions need to take in relation to advertising roles on certain local job portals, etc. Educational ministries will often, however, require all employees in educational institutions to have police clearance certificates or criminal record checks in light of the nature of the business and an institution's safeguarding obligations to ensure that they recruit individuals who are suitable to work with children and young people. Aside from these obligations, institutions will need to invest the time in robust recruitment procedures. It's common practice in the region to require 2 employment references. Background checking in Saudi Arabia, however, is more restrictive than the rest of the region. Institutions should also ideally require applicants to provide personal details, current and former names, passport number and copies, and their current address, details of their present or last employment and reason for leaving, full employment history, such as leaving school, including education, employment and voluntary work, including reasons for any gaps in employment, qualifications, the awarding body and date of award, details of referees and references, and a statement of the personal qualities and experience that the applicant believes are relevant to their suitability for the post advertised and how they meet the person's specification. Other key practical tips include not accepting open references, for example, to whom it may concern, not relying on applicants to obtain their references, ensuring any references are from the candidate's current employer have been completed by a senior person with appropriate authority. Obtain verification of the individual's most recent relevant period of employment where the applicant is not currently employed. Ensure electronic references originate from a legitimate source. Contact referees to clarify content where information is vague or insufficient. Compare the information on the application form with that in the reference and take up any discrepancies with the candidate. Establish the reason for the candidate leaving their current or most recent post and ensure any concerns are resolved satisfactorily before appointment is confirmed. Institutions should ideally make offers of employment subject to conditions such as satisfactory pre-employment checks and an individual's cooperation with the immigration process, provided that such conditions are made clear in any offer letter or employment contract will enable an institution to revoke an employment offer as cost and time efficiently as possible. Top tip 4, selection. Institutions should use a range of selection techniques to identify the most suitable person for the post. This may incorporate some elements of AI, for example, which will need to be carefully managed. For those interviewing, they should be appropriately trained to do so and should agree structured questions. These may include finding out what attracted the candidate to the post being applied for and their motivation for working with children, exploring their skills and asking for examples of experience of working with children which are relevant to the role, and probing any gaps in employment or whether the candidate has changed employment or location frequently, asking about the reasons for this. Top tip 5, manage expectations. The job advertisement is the first opportunity to manage expectations as to the role and the desired skill set and experience. There should be no assumptions made about who may be able to fill the requirements of the role. Where there is a genuine requirement for an applicant with a particular characteristic, the rationale for this should be clearly stated from the beginning. Institutions should also bear in mind the employment laws that may be applicable depending on where the advertisement is being posted. For example, if the advert is posted overseas, to ensure that the advert does not breach any anti-discrimination laws, for example. It is also a good idea to manage expectations in relation to culture in the GCC as early as possible in the process, particularly if an individual has not lived and worked in the Middle East before. For example, cultural expectations in terms of dress codes, behaviour in public, and offences under the penal codes and the potential consequences of such offences, which may not necessarily be considered to be as serious in other countries, should be discussed to help an individual ascertain whether the Middle East is likely to be a good fit for them. In summary, the keys to a successful recruitment process are planning, having a good understanding of the legal framework that impacts the process, gathering as much information as possible, and managing expectations as much as possible. Our team of global and local education specialists will be pleased to assist with any queries you may have in relation to the issues raised in this podcast and any other issues such as employment, governance, real estate, health and safety, disputes, and corporate and commercial issues. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to the Evershed Sutherland Legal Insights podcast.